Hello and welcome back to another episode of Survivor Talks with Mike. We just finished our coverage of Season 2 of Survivor, the Australian Outback, so now it's time to go back and do a full review of the season. For the purposes of this review, I will be breaking it down into 5 portions. First, we'll cover the Premerge and then the Postmerge sections of the season, then the production, followed by twist or new gameplay elements added this season, and lastly, the cast. After giving a score for each of these elements, we'll tally the score and come up with an overall review. Starting with the pre-merge, in this segment we will be using my episode reviews from the episodes up to the point of the merge. We'll also be talking about how the pre-merge affected the later game, and if the time was spent in the pre-merge focusing on the right players. The pre-merge of the Australian Outback might be its highest point. This season comes in hot right out of the gates. We get a pretty decent premiere, though it doesn't introduce our eventual winner. This is then followed up by some of the most iconic episodes of Survivor. We get the beef jerky incident in episode 2. Everything with Marilyn in episode 3 is awesome. The pig hunt in episode 4, and it peaks with Mike falling into the fire in episode 6. It's really just a spectacular first half of the season. So going back to my reviews, episode 1 I gave an 8 out of 10, episode 2 a 9 out of 10, episode 3 a 10 out of 10, episode 4 an 8 out of 10, episode 5 a 7 out of 10, and episode 6 another 10 out of 10. The average comes out to 8.67, and so I decided to round that up to 9 because I believe this truly is a great pre-merge that works really well to get the viewers hooked into the show. So the pre-merge gets a score of 9 out of 10. On to the post-merge. This segment will be much the same as the pre-merge segment, only instead we will be looking at the episodes from the post-merge. We will look into the winner and how well their journey through the post-merge portion of the game is told. After such a strong pre-merge, the hope would be that the post-merge would take that setup and blow us away with a satisfying ending. It starts out strong enough, but sadly due to the change to a 42-day season, it fizzles out and becomes a little dull at times. While Tina wasn't exactly set up very well in the pre-merge, she does start to come out, and I think the story of how Colby lost does end up satisfying. Episode 7 I gave a 9 out of 10, episode 8 I gave a 6 out of 10, episode 9 was the recap episode so I won't give it a score, episode 10 was a 9 out of 10, episode 11 a 4 out of 10, episode 12 an 8 out of 10, episode 13 a 5 out of 10, episode 14 a 5 out of 10, and the finale I gave a 6 out of 10. This is a 6.5 average. So the post-merge gets a score of 6.5 out of 10. On to the production. The production segment is where I'll talk about the filmmaking portions of the season and the quality of the show that is put in front of us. This will handle editing, locations, and shots. This season vastly improves on the first season. It basically takes everything that worked and improves on it, and then takes the things that didn't work and fixes them. They removed unimportant things like the gong and the conch shell and the treasure chest. They made the parchment for voting much easier to write on and more water resistant. Jeff improves as a host and has become a lot more comfortable in front of the camera, though he still could get better. The camera coverage is a lot better too, getting some very interesting shots and even getting the moment of Mike falling in the fire. I would still like a little bit more out of the camera coverage, however, as there are some moments that we still just go by word of mouth, such as the Kel beef jerky incident. The editing is great in this season, and you could tell they were often having a lot of fun putting scenes together to either have a laugh with or at the castaways. The music is more noticeable in this season, with some cases being great, like the theme song having the didgeridoo worked into it, and the moments of the Kucha tribe saying goodbye to Mike were made more touching with its music. but also during the challenges, the weird techno music does not seem to fit well. One last major flaw about the production would have to be the change to 42 days. I get they wanted to make it bigger and more extreme, but it just didn't work out for the pacing of the show. So production, I give a score of 6 out of 10. Twist and new elements. In this segment, we will discuss the new twist and advantages that were in this season, and if they had a positive or negative effect on the game. As this season doesn't really add anything new or any new twist, and just continues what we got last season, I will not count this towards the end score of the review. I will say, however, that it takes what Season 1 did so well and perfects that formula. For the cast, this is what I would generally say is the most important part of any Survivor season. I break down the cast into 5 categories: great, good, okay, dud, and get them off my screen. Get them off my screen is reserved for players who offended me as a viewer, and in general I just don't want to watch them. Duds aren't bad people, they just didn't pop on screen or do anything to really affect the game. Okay has players who either didn't last long enough to make an impact either way, or at the very least didn't take away from the experience of watching. Good are the standard for what I want players to be, and great go above and beyond to make them players I want to see play again and again. Survivor the Australian Outback has a weird cast to assess. At the time of airing, the cast was extremely iconic, with many of them going on to achieve celebrity status, and also half the cast will return in later seasons. With that said, though, some of them haven't aged well. Most notably Mike is now in my get them off my screen category. Varner for some could also be there, and while I don't quite put him in the same category as Mike, I do think he is questionable at best. Elizabeth also has some political views I don't really like to see, which has slightly hurt her in my view of her. With all that, however, there are still some absolute stars in Colby, Jerry, Tina, Roger, Marilyn, Kimmy, and Alicia. At the other end, we do have some duds like Nick and Kel, and even though I like Amber, I would still call her a dud too. Despite the issues with the cast, I still think they are very iconic and entertaining enough to have a strong score. I give the cast a score of an 8 out of 10. For the overall review, this is where I'll be compiling my thoughts on the season as a whole. This season suffers a bit just due to being too long and how some of the cast has become in the years since it aired, tainting my view of them. The pre-merge and the overall improvements made to this season are what really bring it to soaring heights. The overall score is a 7.4 out of 10. The lows of the post-merge and the slightly weaker cast hold this season back from surpassing Season 1, but honestly I would put either of the first 2 seasons on a similar level. That's all for this one. Thank you for watching. Please hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed watching it and you want to catch my next videos, which will be starting my coverage of Survivor Season 42.